Okay, good morning, everybody. And we are continuing with the chapter on factors that detract from Zehirus in the Mesilas Yesharim, in the Ramchal's Path of the Just. And we're talking about what are those things that get in the way of us living this sort of more ideal, more optimal way of living, where we're continuously going through this process of self-analysis, analyzing our deeds, analyzing our actions, thinking about our ways. And he identifies three general areas that get in the way of us being able to succeed. One of them is involvement and preoccupation with worldly matters. Okay, that's the one that we're actually focusing on right now. The second two are levity and mockery, meaning you don't take anything seriously. Everything is a joke. Everything is, made light of. And the third one is bad company, the people that you're hanging out with. Wait, am I frozen, by the way, or
no?
Okay.
Everybody else was frozen on my screen, but I'm not. Okay, good. So we're focusing on preoccupation with worldly matters and how being over-involved in the world can get in the way of us being able to grow, develop ourselves spiritually, and deepen our awareness of Hashem and connection to Hashem in our life. So we're on 98 on the bottom. And I'll just back up. Actually, let's just back up a drop. Basically, what the Ramchal was saying until now, if you look on the page 97 on the bottom, he says that it's absolutely impossible for a person to be cured of this ailment of living life without Zehirus, without utilizing the remedy.
Recording in progress.
Without using the remedy that Hashem gave us. What's the remedy that Hashem gave us? The remedy that Hashem gave us is I created the evil inclination, and I created the Torah as its antidote. Okay, so the way to develop ourselves, and the way to overcome this challenge, is through Torah. Through learning Torah, through studying Torah, through connection to Torah, through being involved and engaged in the wisdom of Torah. Whoever thinks that he can be rescued from the evil inclination without Torah study is simply mistaken. And he will recognize his mistake in the end when he dies in a state of sin. Meaning, at a certain point, it's too late. Sorry, I just have to deal with one thing inside. Deal with one thing very quickly.
David, where are you? I'm sorry.
I am on page 798 on the top. Hold on 1 second. Shoot. Okay. Fine. Okay, so his point over here is that there's only one way to do battle with the Yetzer Hara, and that is through the learning of Torah, through the connection to Torah. And if we come up with our own plan about how we can overcome the Yetzer Hara without going through the methodology of Torah, Ramchal is telling us that we're making a serious mistake. And we won't realize it until we end up leaving this world and it's too late. Right? In other words, while you're alive, you might not even know, you might not even understand or appreciate that you're heading in a negative direction or that you're failing to reach your potential. And you might not even, that's the scary thing. And we all know people like this, and we all at times in our lives are like this ourselves, where we're just plugging away. We don't even realize things aren't right. We don't even realize that we're not living the way we have the potential to live. And when do you find out? Sometimes you don't find out until it's too late. Sometimes you don't find out until you've left this world, and what truth and reality are revealed to you. And all of a sudden you understand that you missed the opportunity that life afforded you. And that's a very, very sad reality. And he's telling us straight out, and he's telling us because Hashem tells us in the Torah that the only way to combat the evil inclination is through the study of Torah. He says the evil inclination is really very, very strong within a person. And if left unchecked, then without the person's awareness, it grows constantly stronger within him and eventually dominates him. You don't even know this is going on. It's happening. It's taking place in our lives. Yetzer hara is beginning to dominate our thinking and to control us, and we don't even know it. And if we're not engaged in serious Torah study, then it's happening, whether you see it or not. So even if he employs all the strategies in the world, but does not take the one remedy that was created for it, which is the study of Torah, as I've written above, he will not be aware of it or even feel it, the strengthening of his spiritual illness, until he dies in his state of sin and his soul is lost. It's a very heavy duty statement that he's making over here. But and as the Ramchal is known, the way his style is, that he doesn't pull punches. He's telling you exactly as it is. The Yetzer hara inside of us is dominant. It will get in the way of us reaching our potential. It will prevent us from being the people that were put on this earth to be. And the only way, not the best way, not the most effective way, but the only way to even stand a chance against the Yetzer hara is through Torah learning. Any questions about that so far? He's going to give an analogy, a parable, to try to illustrate this point a little bit more clearly.
I have a question. I always felt that somehow, because people are so disgruntled, that they have this feeling that is looking for their purpose, that it's like a voice inside you. They might not know that the study of Torah is what they're looking for, but people do have an inkling of it.
I think you're right. I think that Hashem designed us in such a way where things happen in our lives where we'll feel inside of us internally, we'll feel something missing, we'll feel something wrong, we'll feel that something's not quite right. I think that if we're paying attention to our inner voice, we will recognize that and notice that in our lives. And I think that's really important to pay attention to that. And when you hear that inside of you, that voice inside of you, or when you feel that inside of you, you know that it's like if you have a vitamin deficiency, you'll know sooner or later it's going to come out. Or if you have some kind of other, deficiency in your diet, it's going to affect you. It's going to manifest in some physical way. So the same thing is true with a Torah deficiency, a spiritual deficiency. If you're not feeding your neshama with the one, diet that it needs, which is, as a Jew, which is Torah learning, the neshama is going to have deficiencies and it's going to come out in different ways. And you'll be able to feel it and see it and experience it. But over time, after a while, you keep ignoring it and keep ignoring it forever and ever and ever, then it'll stop bothering you. It'll go away. And that's not a good thing, because then you have no chance of waking up and turning your life around. So let's take a look at the analogy that he gives, the parable. To what may this be compared? So by the way, what are we trying to compare? We're trying to compare a person who says, you know what? I've got my own way to solve my problems. I have a different approach to how to deal with the Yetzer Hara. I know, Hashem, you say you created the Yetzer Hara and you created the Torah as the antidote. I get it, I understand that, but I've got a different approach. I'm going to take, some other self-help approach towards combating my Yetzer Hara that doesn't involve Torah, and I'm going to solve it myself. So what can this be compared to? To a sick person who consulted with doctors who diagnosed his illness and instructed him to take a certain medicine. But he, without any prior knowledge of the science of healing, sets aside that medicine and instead takes whatever medicine enters his mind. Won't this sick person certainly die? So too it is with the matter of the evil inclination. For there's no one who truly recognizes the illness of the evil inclination and the power with which it has been, with which it has been invested, except for its creator, who created it. He warned us, meaning Hashem, that the only remedy for it is Torah. Who then can set aside that remedy and take whatever else he might take in its stead and hope to survive? No one. It is certain that such an individual's fate will be that the darkness of physicality will proceed to overpower him step by step until he will not even be aware of his gradual decline, until he finds himself completely mired in evil and so far removed from truth that even the slightest notion of searching for the truth will not enter his mind. Meaning he's lost connection to his potential and lost connection to the wisdom of Torah to such a degree that now he's like the child that doesn't even know how to ask. It's too far. He's too far disconnected from it. It's going to be impossible or close to impossible for him to find his way back. And
David,
that's what happens.
Yeah. Question. But that analogy is so true. Anybody who's in teaching or healthcare or does therapy knows how many people will resist getting better or improving because they want to do it their own way, or they don't want to change, or for reasons unknown. Ignorance is a lot of it, but a lot of it is just squeezing your eyes shut. So that happens a lot in this world, and it sort of leads me to believe that maybe free will wasn't that great an idea, because so many people opt out.
Yeah, but without free will, our lives are meaningless. So we have to have free will.
Really? Are they really meaningless if people were, better to one another, if we were programmed to do what was good, what God wanted us to do, would it really be that meaningless?
Well, what would be the purpose of then we're robots? Why would Hashem create us if we're programmed to do His will? There's no point in creation, isn't?
Well, no point from our point of view. I mean, but you're assuming that the assumption is that it would be meaningless for Hashem, but he'd have this wonderful world where people would do his will. Would they actually acknowledge him as king and actually do what he designed them to do?
They're not acknowledging as king if they're robots. I mean, if they're pre-programmed to acknowledge him as king, Hashem doesn't need he doesn't need to have a world in the first place. I mean, it's a big philosophical question. I mean, we can debate it another time, but Hashem doesn't need a world. The only reason why Hashem creates a world is so that he can give out of something that's outside of himself. But he wants to give something that's meaningful. He doesn't want to give something that's meaningless. If it's pre-programmed and automatic, then we're just making why would he do it in the first place? Just don't create a world. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit and go into something that I found very interesting in the Torah portion, and as it relates to this topic. It relates to the topic of the role that Torah learning plays in the building of our whole system of values and priorities in life. You know, one of the things that now that I'm reached the ripe old age of 52, one of the things that I realize is that life really boils down to priority, how we prioritize things in our life. Like Ali said something like, she said something the other day, like, it's not that you can't do X, whatever it was. It could have been any number of things, exercise maybe, or whatever it was. It's just that you're choosing not to. Right? When I was working with a coach recently, I said I should really try to make some time to do something. And she said, you don't, make time to do something. You have to prioritize that part of your life and bump it up on your list of priorities so that it takes on more importance and significance, and then you'll do it. Everything in life is about what we prioritize. And we're constantly in the process of deciding what's more important and what's less important. So for some people, we prioritize, physical, material success and gain. Some people prioritize, my daughter Talia went for Shabbos to a friend of hers who lives in like a Haredi community in Jerusalem, and they all live in like sort of a, what we would consider what would look like to us like poverty. They live in small apartments with lots of kids, and the question is like, that we were talking about this is why they live like that, and the answer is because they prioritize spirituality, they prioritize Torah learning, they prioritize spiritual growth over material comfort or material success. And therefore, they'd rather spend more time learning Torah and doing mitzvos and less time, generating income. And as a result, they have to live in less than ideal material reality. But it's not because like she was saying, I feel so bad for them. And I was saying, don't feel bad for them. This is what they've prioritized in their life. They have a choice. If they wanted to, they could, work more, study less, and have a bigger apartment. But this is to them, this is what they have prioritized in their life. So that's how we are. We prioritize certain things in our lives, and it changes throughout our lives. But in Judaism, we have to be challenging ourselves on a regular basis to prioritize Torah learning and the internalization of Torah wisdom into our lives more and more, right? And in order to prioritize that, we have to sacrifice other things, whether it's sacrificing things in our schedule. I'd love to watch. Ali was watching some new series on Hulu about the new pharmaceutical, the Sackler family. And she wanted me to watch it with her, but it was like 10 hours, more, probably like 12 hours. Like, I am not going to prioritize that. I'm not going to prioritize 12 hours of watching something about, on Hulu when I could use those 12 hours to be watching something on Netflix. No, I'm kidding. Well, when I could use those 12 hours to be learning Torah or doing something meaningful. So everything is about prioritizing of our lives, prioritizing our spiritual lives over our material lives, or vice versa. And that's what the Ramchal is talking about over here. We really want to grow. We really want to live meaningful lives. So Hashem tells us there's one thing you have to do. You have to prioritize Torah in your life. So how does this connect to the Parsha? So not the Parsha that you guys read, but the Parsha that we read, which means it's the Parsha that you're going to read this Shabbos. We're still one Parsha ahead of you, although I'm pretty sure we catch up with each other this week. Because I think you guys are doubling up this week in the diaspora, and we are separating them. So I think as of next week, we'll be caught up. But in the Parsha that you guys are going to read this coming week, we come across the story of the request of the two tribes of Rouvain and Gad. And the two tribes of Rouvain and Gad, what was the request that they made? So I'm going to read it to you. It's from Parshas Matos in the sixth Aliyah, chapter 32. It says the children of Rouvain and the children of God had abundant livestock, a lot, very great. Ma'od. They saw the land of Yazer and the land of Gilad, and behold, the place was a place for livestock, right? It was a perfect land for grazing their animals. Now, where was this land? I'll show you. Hold on 1 second. Let me show you a picture. Hold on. You see this map over here? So this is the Jordan River. You see the Jordan River, okay? So the area, this part, of course, is Israel. And the area that the children of Rouvain and the children of God were requesting was this area over here. Okay, can everybody see that? Yeah, somebody just say yes, so I know that I.
Yeah. Yeah.
This area right here where the X is, that was the area that they were requesting. And if you notice, it's not in Israel. Okay, this is the border. So they were basically asking to inherit Jordan instead of the land of Israel. Why? Because it was a very rich and abundant, there was a lot of livestock there. I mean, there was a lot of room for livestock and cattle, and it was a great place for grazing. And that's where they wanted to live. So they suggested that to Moshe. And Moshe became very, very upset. He objected vehemently to this request. Now, it happens to be that Moshe thought, commentaries explain that Moshe's first thought was, why did they not want to go into the land? Why did they want to stay over there on the east side of the Jordan River and not cross into the land of Israel? What do you think what was Moshe's initial thought about why they didn't want to go in?
They didn't want to fight.
That's right. They didn't want to fight. They were scaredy cats, right? So Moshe says to them, shall your brothers go out to battle while you settle here? Which, by the way, is a kind of a clarion call. It's a phrase today that's used in sort of Israeli culture to say, like, you're not carrying your weight. You're not like, your brothers are going to go into battle and go into fight, and you're just going to sit here, right? You're not going to do your part. You're not going to do your military service. You're not going to carry your weight. That was what Moshe said to them. So they responded, no. We have no problem going into battle. We are all in on the battle. In fact, we even will volunteer to go in first, to be the vanguard, to be the first in battle and to go in and to fight. And we will stay and we'll fight until it's all over. All the land has been conquered and all the land has been settled, which, by the way, took 14 years for the conquering and the settling of the land. And then we'll go back. In the meantime, we'll leave our families and our children and everybody over on the east side of the river. And then when it's all done, we'll come back and join them. And Moshe says, okay, if that's the case, then I guess I see that you guys are for real, and that's fine. You have a deal. So they made a deal, and that's exactly what happened. But the question is, so then what was motivating the Rouvain and Gadites, the Rouvainites and the Gadites? What was motivating them? If it wasn't fear of fighting, then why were they willing to give up their part of the land? Why were they willing to give up their right to inherit part of the land of Israel?
They didn't want to be close to elements that would undermine their spirituality. This way they were isolated and they did not have temptations to to become idol worshippers or to give up a Torah.
Okay. I don't know where you got that from. It's an interesting theory, but I would actually argue the opposite. Because first of all, where they were going to be isolated among idol worshippers. They're going to be basically on the Jordanian side of the river, surrounded by idol worshippers, as opposed to being part of the Jewish people and be surrounded by. I know, like, it's a lot easier. I always say it's a lot easier I'm always amazed. I mean, blown away by people that become more observant in America. When I became observant, I did it in Jerusalem because, in Jerusalem, it's almost hard not to be observant. You're going with the flow. I met somebody recently, this woman from Canada, not Jewish woman. She asked me why I made Aliyah. I said, because you know what? As an Orthodox Jew, everywhere you go in the world, you're swimming upstream. But in Jerusalem, in Israel, you're going with the flow, So I think it'll be a lot harder for them to remain spiritually connected in isolated, by themselves, surrounded by idol worshippers than they would had they gone into the land of Israel with the rest of the Jewish people. I mean, the reason why they wanted to go in, why they wanted not to go in, why they wanted to stay there, it's explicit. How does this whole story begin? Children of Rouvain and the children of God had abundant livestock. Very great. They were very successful. And they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilad, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. So they came to Moshe and they said, hey, we would really like to stay here. It's a land for livestock, and your servants have a lot of livestock. If we found favor in your eyes, let us be given to your servants as a heritage. Do not bring us across the Jordan. So it's clear what was going on was they had a different value system. They had prioritized their material success and their business, of being shepherds or farmers or whatever they were, over what spiritual gains were available to them in the land of Israel. And this was something that was very upsetting to Moshe. And in fact, when Moshe points this out in a very, very clever way, when they were requesting to go in to stay where they were, they said, what was the language that they used? They said, we will build, let us stay here so that we can build pens or whatever they're called for our livestock and dwelling places for our children. Okay, so that's what they said. And Moshe, when he responded to them, what did he say back to them? Just trying to find the exact verse. 1 second. Here. Build for yourself cities for your small children and pens for your flock. They said, let us stay so that we can build pens for our flock and cities for our small children. And Moshe said, okay, fine. You want to stay, you can stay. Build cities for your small children and pens for your flock. What changed? What changed is the order, right? What changed is the order. And what Moshe was saying to them basically was, this is quoting for the Talmud, that you guys are too focused. You're focused more on your money than you are on your children. You're focused more on your financial success than you are on the development of your families. We all know people like that. Moshe was giving them a hard time because their priorities had become incorrect in a sense. So Moshe agrees to it, and then all of a sudden, this is what I wanted to point out, which is super interesting. That that when it comes to in the end, it says that Moshe. Okay, so Moshe gave this land on the other side of the Jordan River. He gave it to the children of Rouvain, and the children of Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. Let's get this straight. Rouvain and Gad were the ones that came. The tribes of Rouvain and the tribe of Gad were the ones that came and requested this, deal with Moshe. We will go fight. We'll stay until the land is settled, and then we'll go back and we'll dwell on the other side of the Jordan River. And Moshe finally accepts the deal. He gives them a little bit of a lesson about their priorities. And then in the end, it says, so Moshe gave them, the children of Gad, the children of Reuben, and half the tribe of Manasseh, the kingdom of Sichon, the king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, on the other side of the Jordan River. Where did this tribe of Manasseh, half the tribe of Manasseh, come from? Why did he?
Hashem, their priorities was Torah, and so he sent them to the two other tribes to give them at least a chance to continue learning Torah.
Correct, Mundo. That is absolutely correct. Manasseh, the two things about Manasseh that we know. One is that they had a disproportionate number of Talmidei Chachamim, of scholars that came from the tribe of Manasseh, Torah scholars. So they were a tribe that excelled in Torah learning and Torah commitment, right? And that's why he wanted them to be there with the Reubenites and the Gadites, to be able to potentially inspire them and teach them and uplift them and to help them to remain connected to Torah, because without that, if they just remained on the other side of the river alone, they would be assimilated immediately or very quickly. And also, they were known to have a love for the land, because Manasseh is where the tribe that produced the daughters of Tzalachad. The daughters of Tzalachad were the ones that came and said to Moshe, hey, wait a minute. Our father died in the desert and we did get a portion of the land. We also want to inherit the land. We also want our children and grandchildren to have a share in the land of Israel, because they had such a love for the land of Israel. And why half? Why did he put half of them with Rouvain and Gad and leave half of them on the western side of the Jordan River, allow half of them to come in and half of them to stay? Because that would guarantee that the families and the connections between Rouvain and between Manasseh and Manasseh, the Menashehites on one side of the river and the Menashehites on the other side of the river, would maintain a connection between the 2.5 tribes on the eastern side of the Jordan and the tribes on the other side of the river. So it was this whole plan from Moshe was about making sure that Torah would still remain a living part of their lives, so that potentially they could be influenced to a point where they could rearrange their value system, rearrange their priorities. Because without that, they were going to be lost. They were going to quickly assimilate into the culture.
Rabbi,
yeah.
Do Chazal say anything about why Manasseh agreed to that deal rather than
I was wondering that too. I don't know if they were given an option. We don't even see that Moshe gave them the choice. It almost sounds like that was a hierarchical decision by Moshe, which is interesting, right? Because why wouldn't they, be able to get some say in that? But no, I haven't seen anything in Chazal about that.
Yeah, but don't we know that Ephraim and Manasseh, their forebears, grew up in Egypt in a very assimilated environment and maintained their Judaism? So hopefully the same thing would result when they in this situation.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great connection. Right? Ephraim and Manasseh were the two sons of Yosef who were born and raised in Mitzrayim. So maybe that's why, part of the reason why he threw Manasseh in there, to be able to have made, to be able to, they obviously knew the trick of survival in a foreign land. So yeah, that's great. Excellent point.
Was this Moshe's idea, or was this Hashem's direction and Moshe was carrying it out? Is that clear?
It's not clear from. It's not clear. It's not clear from the psukim. I don't know. You know, without going into it, researching a little bit more, it's hard to know, right? Where this was being sort of instigated from. But the way it seems in the psukim, it seems to be that it was Moshe. It was Moshe's idea. Moshe's doing. Like we don't see that he went and consulted with Hashem like we see he did with the how to deal with the Benos Salafchad situation. It doesn't say that. So I don't know if you can infer from there that he didn't, that this was his own move, or I'm not sure. But that's how it seems. It seems that it was
A pretty big decision.
Yeah, it was. Okay. Anyway, so let's go back now into the text of the Ramchal. So, so his point that he's been making over here is that there is no way to avoid whatever you want to say, assimilation or deterioration of your commitment to Torah learning and to Jewish values and to Judaism and to spirituality, to spiritual growth, without a cocktail or a prescription of Torah, of some cocktail of Torah in your life. Okay, you can't just like if I were to go to Dr. Glickman and say, hey, I got this issue with, I don't know what, my kidneys or my liver or something. And Mike says, okay, here's the medicine that you have to take. And you're like, you know what, I don't really like that medicine. I'm going to take, ibuprofen instead. Not only is it not going to help, it's going to make things worse, right? So Hashem told us, you want to stay connected Jewishly, you want to grow, you want to be spiritual, Torah. Period. Okay.
Doesn't he also say, though, earlier in the book that, you also have to study Musar. You have to really, study your motivations, your character, to bring you to a level to recognize that you need this. Just like a patient has to have some self-awareness to recognize that he needs, if he wants to be healthy, you have to also study and recognize and pay attention to that as well.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's an important thing that you're bringing up. When I talk about Torah, it doesn't just mean, the Parsha or whatever. It means Musa. It means studying of any form of Torah, and especially the ones that you're talking about, the ones that help you get into, some of the like this, right? We're learning Mesilas Yesharim. Are we learning Torah right now? 100%. Absolutely, we're learning Torah, and we're learning the type of Torah that's really going to prepare us to be able to, do battle with the Yitzhar, or to at least resist the constant temptations of the Yitzhar, for sure. And I like the analogy also with the patient. Like you said, the patient has to have self-awareness. The patient has to understand that that there is an issue over here, and that if you're not treating it and you're not taking it seriously, it is going to get worse, and it's going to, ultimately it could be life-threatening. Okay, so we're on the bottom of 100 now. Having explained that Torah study in general is a prerequisite for the attainment of spirituality, Ramchal returns to the subject of Zehirus and explains how Torah study facilitates attainment of this trait. Okay, right now, up until now, we haven't said the how. We've only said the what. The what is that Torah study brings us to a greater level of Zehirus. But we haven't explained how. So now he's going to get into that a little bit. Now, included in this requirement to set aside time to study Torah is also the setting aside of times for accounting of one's deeds and how they can be corrected. But this is the essence of Zehirus. It's going back to the idea of what we call cheshbon hanefesh, that it's not enough, just to sit and learn Torah for an hour a day or whatever. But then you have to take the ideas of Torah, the values of Torah, and measure yourself up against those values and ask yourself, let's say you're studying the Ramchal and you come across a new value. Let's say later on in the book, we come across nikius, cleanliness. It's not talking about personal hygiene. We'll see what it's talking about when we get there. But now you've learned something new. You've learned a new concept. You've learned about a new midah, a new character trait, and abstinence, or whatever purity, whatever the character traits are in this book. You learn about a new one. Now you've got that knowledge, but now you have to take that knowledge and that information and measure yourself up against that value, and ask yourself, is this a value for me? Am I working on this? Is this something that I can incorporate into my life? How can I incorporate this into my life? How can I bring this into a deeper place inside of me? So that is a big part of this whole process, is spiritual accounting. And as I've written above, we talked about this in chapter 3. But even aside from all this, i.e. the time designated for Torah study and introspection, whatever free time remains for a person from his business matters, if he is wise, he will certainly not waste it. Rather, he will immediately seize upon the free time and not let it go, and use it to engage in the affairs of his soul and the improvement of his divine service. So what do we do when we have free time? Everybody needs free time. Everybody needs downtime. Everybody needs a little vacation. Everybody needs a little break. I'm not talking about that. But how do we structure our day? What do we do when we're done with work, or we're done with our responsibilities? What time do I check out, from life? By 8 o'clock at night, am I like, okay, a couple hours of Netflix and then I'll go to bed? Is that how I structure my life? Or am I dedicating free time and I'm not working and I'm not caught up in other matters that are important? Do I use that time for affairs of the soul and improvement of divine service? That's what the Ramchal is talking about over here. Yeah. Ramchal concludes his discussion for the first factor that detracts from Zehirus by contrasting with the other two. Okay. This undermining factor, remember there are 3. Number 1 is preoccupation with worldly matters. Number 2 is mockery and levity, which we haven't discussed yet. And number 3 is bad company, which we haven't discussed yet. So this undermining factor, this first one, the one of over involvement with the material world, although it is the most prevalent of the 3, every one of us struggles with it. We're too focused on our careers, or we're too focused on earning money, or too focused on our physical needs. So even though it's the most prevalent, it is nevertheless the easiest of the 3 to avoid. For one who truly wishes to escape from it. Okay, meaning the next 2 are harder. The next 2, levity and mockery, and bad company, are harder to avoid and harder to uproot than this one, which is over-occupation, overly focused on the material world. Because in the end of the day, you could change your priorities. You can reevaluate your life. You can rearrange your priorities in life, and you could do them slightly, ever so slightly, right? I mean, the amount of time that we waste on things that are just stupid, and will get us nowhere, and do nothing to build us as people, and do nothing to increase our wisdom.
Rabbi David, could you define worldly events? What do you mean by that? Is it just material, the desire to get material things, or is there more to it than that? Because is it reading the newspaper? Is it being aware of your environment? Is it what does it include?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you what he said, how he says it in Hebrew, and then we can discuss this. This is hatipul v'hatirda olamit. So tipul is you know, any time that you're overly involved in an area where your involvement isn't really going to make any difference or change anything or help anything, and it's not going to get you anywhere, and it's not going to do anything for your growth. That's basically what we're talking about. So it doesn't say you should have no involvement in the physical world or the occupation in the physical world. We know we're studying in the yeshiva on Thursday mornings. We're studying the Shara Bitachon, the gate of Bitachon in the duties of our heart. And Bitachon is all about trusting in Hashem, the balance between trusting in Hashem and making our hishtadlus, our own investment and effort, physical human endeavor. We know from there, but we also just know in general. And of course, we need to be involved in the physical world. I need to go to work. I need to try to make a living. I need to do what I can. And I need to, where I can make a difference, I need to make a difference. But then there's things that just have nothing to do with us. Have absolutely nothing to do with us. What does, the Cubs winning or losing have anything to do with us? It's fun. It's entertainment. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. And not the Cubs. The Cubs are not entertainment, but there's nothing wrong with entertainment. But if you're in the realm of entertainment, know that you're in the realm of entertainment, and then prioritize it appropriately. Don't, sometimes I'm shocked by how much time people spend watching sports. I'm not saying you should never watch sports. If you enjoy it, go watch a football game, on a Sunday or whatever. But imagine spending your whole Sunday watching football, or your whole Saturday watching college football. Or the amount of time that then you get into a fantasy football league. You could be spending hours and hours and hours a week involved in what? In a sport where a bunch of big guys are running around beating the crap out of each other and trying to steal a ball from each other and what is it when you think about it? Like, what really is it? So how have you prioritized that in your life in such a way where you've dedicated this much time to being invested in something that really it's just entertainment? And there's nothing wrong with some entertainment, but don't your life should not be about work and entertainment, because then where are you building yourself? Where have you dedicated time for growth and for wisdom and for improvement? Where have you dedicated time to being a kinder person, to doing more chesed, to helping society? How are you helping the world or yourself or anybody when you're sitting on the couch watching a football game? You're not. Okay, so does that mean you shouldn't do it? No, but you shouldn't overdo it. Do it some. Spend, if it's something you really enjoy, so dedicate a little bit of time to it. But what happens is we end up spending so much time in entertaining ourselves and involved in things that really have no inherent value, in the sense that they're not making me better in any way. I'm not a better person after I watch the football game than I was before I watched the football game. The world is not a better place after I watched the football game than it was before I watched the football game. So if I know that, then limit it and do it in a minimal amount, and spend more time doing the types of things that are going to make me a better person.
I think besides leisure, I think that also applies to working. I think a lot of us maybe work more than we should for other reasons, maybe for material reasons potentially, or just workaholic, just habit. But work can do the same thing, right? Besides, if you at that prioritizes over spiritual growth and doesn't allow time for that as well.
Absolutely, right. And sometimes, look, life is expensive. You have several kids. You got to send them to college. It's not cheap. We all know that. So you have to work, and you have to work a lot. but you don't have to work like crazy. And you don't have to take a job that requires you to, travel 15 days or 20 days a month and not be with your family because, because you make 10% more, 15% more than you make in a job where you wouldn't have to travel 20 days a month. You gotta think about all these things when you make these decisions. And unfortunately, the Yetzer Hara will push you into getting more and more and more involved in your work and your occupation and your entertainment and your leisure and your hobbies and all these things, because if it can hook you up with all of that, then it knows for sure that you're not focusing on Torah learning, wisdom, spiritual growth, prayer, chesed, and the things in life that really matter. Basically, put it like this: write down on a piece of paper all the things that you would want said about you at the funeral. And those are the things that are really important in life. Those are the things that you should be prioritizing in life. Your eulogy values, not your resume values, as David Brooks famously coined in his TED Talk. Your eulogy values are the things that really matter in life. Those should be the ones that you're prioritizing. You have to work, and you have to, your resume values are important to some degree, but they don't define you, and they don't matter in the end of the day. What matters is impact that you leave on other people, the legacy, your moral legacy, your spiritual legacy, and those are the things that we need to be focusing on, not preoccupation with worldly matters.
David, you have not addressed the issue when you try to bring Torah values to the workplace, and how almost inevitably in capitalism, where profit is the number one factor, the collision almost every day of Torah values and the values of the workplace. That happens over and over and over again. And you can, these are difficult issues. One might have to leave one's profession, one's parnasa, in order to live a Torah life, or do some big compromising in order to have the balance so that you can leave as Torah life as you can in your business, but have enough to provide for your family and live a Torah life outside of your business. To me, it happens all the time.
Yeah, it's a tremendous challenge, and it does require, like, a person has to reassess. What do I want to do in my life? What's the most important to me? And if making money is the most important thing to me, then I'll choose a career that's going to require that I work 70, 80, 90 hours a week or whatever. I'll make a lot of money, and that's fine. That's what I chose. But a lot of times you're right. A lot of times certain careers and professions are less compatible with the Torah lifestyle, and sometimes you do have to make difficult decisions. I have a friend who his whole life wanted to be a pilot, and he was a pilot, and he was a successful pilot, and he could have made a great living being a pilot. But then he came to Jerusalem. He discovered Torah and Judaism and wisdom of the ancient wisdom of the Jewish people and Shabbos. And in order for him to keep his career going as a pilot, he had to have to fly on Shabbos, and he gave it up. Gave up his career as a pilot, and that was obviously a huge decision for him. But he doesn't regret it. He made a lot of money doing something else too, which probably helps. But that's just how life is. So if something is important to you, if Torah and wisdom and values of Judaism are important to you, then you have to be willing to sacrifice for them and not overly engage in things that are going to pull you away from that.
No, but sometimes moral decisions, ethical decisions, contrary to what you believe, but part of the culture of the workplace where your money is the deciding factor, and what's best for the client, what's best for the patient is secondary. And that happens all the time.
All the time, right? I mean, you could tell a patient that you know, he needs an extra filling that he doesn't need, so that you could take Paul out for a nice dinner, you know, but you're not going to do that because you know you have good values. Paul might want you to do that, but you're not going to do it, right?
No, I'm talking about productivity over discussions about cause. I'm talking about if it offends a parent to tell the truth, you don't tell it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Institutional values that are based on money and not on ethics.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't be the only person that runs into that.
No.
Especially in you know today's world where you know the emphasis on money can be overwhelming to the point where if you're not on board with that, you're not a team player. You don't get it.
100%.
Yeah. So do you struggle within that framework to try to turn the ship around maybe a little bit, or do you leave so that you can follow an ethical life and suffer all the consequences thereof and not make any change in the marketplace, which is going off in a aberrant direction?
Good question. I mean, you know, every situation is different, but you know, you gotta figure out the balance and what makes sense in your life. Okay, I gotta run, everybody. I gotta fly. I'm gonna see you all hopefully later in the week. But wishing everyone the best, and stay in touch. Okay.
Thank you. Safe
Thank you,
travels.
Rabbi.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, David, from Doris and Ron.
Thank you, Doris. Send love to
May this
Jennifer.
be your best.
Birthday.
Happy birthday, dog, from Mom.
Oh, hi, Mom. We'll call you. Okay.
Okay,
Call
good.
you.
Call your mom.
Happy birthday.